Hi there and welcome. My name is Matthew Coles and I'm a Principal Technical Account Manager at AWS based out of Melbourne, Australia. Today I'd like to speak to you about building serverless mobile and web applications using the AWS Amplify framework. To get started, we'll have a look at the mobile and web application landscape today, as well as some of the coming trends that we do see emerging within the space. We'll then have a look at AWS Amplify and some of the use cases and features that will greatly benefit the mobile applications that you might have that are existing or you're just starting to create, and how you can plug in cloud functionality into them very, very quickly. From there, we'll have a look at a demo. I've got a Flutter application that I've built. I'll take you through how that works and I'll show you how easy it is to bring AWS Amplify into that existing application. And last but not least, we'll talk about how you can start your journey today with AWS and AWS Amplify. To get started, we'll have a look at the landscape first. One of the major trends that we do see coming in 2025 is that there's going to be 5 billion devices that are connected to the internet. And if you think about these mobile devices that are connected to the internet, that is a ton of end users that are going to be using them that could potentially use the applications you're building. Next, we already see that 52% of web traffic today is performed on mobile devices. So there's already a huge market that you've got to cater for there. And last but not least, it's a critical market because we do see that 3.7 hours a day on average is how long people are going to spend on their mobile phones. And that's quite significant if you think about it. That's time that they could be potentially using the applications that you create. So going into some other statistics, it's really critical that you get the experience right for the end user. So some of the statistics that I want to bring you through today is that 25% of apps are actually abandoned after the first use. And there's many different reasons for this. It could be that the app was slower than expected, it didn't work, things weren't obvious to the end user. Many different things in that category. The next thing is that 61% of end users expect the app to load within 4 seconds. So it's not really just about it being a good user experience in terms of how they use and interact with the application that's been built. It's really critical that the application performs really, really well and is able to quickly do what the end user wants. Now, 1 out of 3 end users say that if the app crashes on them, they're going to think less of the brand as well. So it's really critical that when you build a mobile or web application, that you get everything right. Now, we know that mobile and web applications are not simple things to build. We know that you've got to think about end user security. How do you make sure that their data is segregated from everyone else and only they and other people that they share their data with can access that in the mobile application? You've also got to think about the fact that mobile devices can be on the go all the time. People could be on the train, they could be on planes, they could be in areas with poor cell reception. It's really critical that your app doesn't work just online, it also works offline as well. And so you've got to have functionality synced between devices in the cloud, and that's really critical to get right. Now, the next thing is scalability. If your application goes viral and many users start to download your application or navigate to your website that you've just created, you've really got to make sure that you can scale that really, really quickly so that you don't miss out on end users that are wanting to use your application. You've also got to think about cost in that case. Serverless will help you with cost because you only pay for the usage of the application at the time that the end user is running it. You've also got to think about not just the scale aspects, but you've got to look at the frameworks. There's many different ways to build mobile applications today. And you've got to make sure that the mobile application that you want, you pick the right technologies that's going to have a good user experience at the end of the day as well. Locality is a big thing as well. You know, we have many different languages in our society, and it's critical that you support the languages of the people that want to use your mobile applications. Now next, speed to market is really critical as well, especially if you've got a brand new application that's doing something that no one else has ever done before. Even if it's an existing application and you just want to really innovate or differentiate yourself on the market, it's critical that you are able to build very, very quickly. Now, not just building very, very quickly, you've also got to think about the performance, the security, and how you can go global within seconds for your mobile application as well. It's critical that you can reach everyone and you can have a really performance secure environment that end users can enjoy the functionality of your apps within. Let's next talk about AWS Amplify and some of the use cases and features that are going to bring value into your mobile applications and web applications by introducing cloud functionality. We really wanted to help you get to market faster and innovate faster. And so what we've done with AWS Amplify is we've built in a whole bunch of functionality that's going to help you get to where you want in terms of development quicker. We have pre-built libraries that you can plug into your application to take use of different AWS services. And we've even gone as far as to add in UI components if you want to simply add in one of these screens that is fully set up in supporting a particular AWS feature as well. You can of course customize those screens or not use them at all and just stick to the libraries also. So there's a lot of power and flexibility in terms of how you use AWS Amplify within your mobile applications and web applications today. The other side is we talked about all the issues that users can experience, and we've tried our best to help you out in that area. So what we've done is we've taken a security-first approach and we've built authentication in using AWS Cognito. And what that means is that you can have an authentication screen that handles all the back-end complexities around authentication straight out of the box for you. And it also enables you to manage the token within the application in a secure manner straight out of the box too. And that also then allows you to introduce access rights as well. So if you've got certain things that you're doing with your application that should be segregated to certain users, you can do that also. An example of this would be image sharing. So for example, if an end user can share images to friends in your application, theoretically, you want to make sure that the access rights are controlled with AWS Cognito so that only whoever the user's chosen, that photo is then shared with as well in their timeline, for example, if you're doing an image sharing app. Now, the next thing is because AWS Amplify has been built with a serverless backend, it effectively means that you can get to scale very, very quickly. So if your application goes viral from 100 users to 1 million users within minutes, AWS Amplify is going to be able to scale across the cloud for you very effectively. And the last thing is AWS allows you to go global within seconds. And so what that effectively means is that you can host your application across any of the availability zones that AWS offers today. So going into the four key aspects that Amplify is really going to bring to your app. The first one is engaging and measuring the end user. So what we've done is we've added support for AWS Pinpoint into your mobile applications. And so what that allows you to do is allows you to track how the user's using your application and whether they're getting stuck in certain sections, whether they're spending a lot of time in different sections, and what's most useful for them. You can collect all these analytics from your mobile application, and then you can see them in dashboards in your AWS account. And so you can effectively make decisions on what you might introduce as a new feature that will help users and what you might change in your existing app to make it a better experience there. The second aspect is really development. We've talked about the libraries that AWS offers to allow you to quickly plug into different services and the UI components, but there's a lot of other details there. I'll go through a bit more of this section in the next slide. So the third thing is testing. So we've got AWS Device Farm. AWS Device Farm allows you to test your application on physical devices. And we have hundreds of these devices available for you to use of different types and varieties, all hosted centrally within AWS cloud infrastructure. So that basically means that you can test out your application and see if it works on all the different device types very quickly. And that way you know that it's not going to have problems when you release to end users that might have a particular device type. You can do end-to-end testing with AWS Device Farm in that manner. Now, the last thing is really deployment and hosting. So we have support for if you're building a web application, we have support for you to basically send a one-line command out to AWS, and that allows you to deploy in any of the availability zones that you might have configured within AWS. So your app can be out there on the web, accessible to users within only a few seconds to minutes. Going into some of the specific libraries that we do offer today, we have many that are available to you to use within your mobile applications. Authentication is one that I've mentioned before, but there's analytics, augmented reality, bringing in machine learning capabilities to your application, so you can do things such as convert a language from one to another, you can make predictions on images and many other things. And after that, there's also support for storage and syncing between cloud databases and on-device databases as well through our data store capabilities. And there's many other things that we do support, as you can see, with AWS Amplify for your mobile applications. And so these all allow you to get started very, very quickly. Now, in terms of what frameworks and what languages Amplify supports today, we support native Android and iOS. We have support for React Native. If you're building a hybrid style app, we have support for Flutter as well. That came out recently as well. And that's what we're going to show in the demo later on. And if you're building a web application, we've got support for vanilla JavaScript, Angular, Vue, and React, and all those standard frameworks. And we've recently come up with support for Next and Nuxt and server-side rendered JavaScript frameworks as well. So you can see no matter what you pick, Amplify is going to be able to support you build that mobile or web application effectively. Let's get to the demo now. So we're going to flip over to my screen and I'll show you a mobile application that I've built using Flutter, and I'm going to start to introduce some of the AWS Amplify features into it. Firstly, I'll take you through the Flutter app I've already created. So as you can see on the right-hand side of my screen, I've got the app launched, up and running on an iPhone 11. So I'll walk you through it just so you can see some of the functionality I've already built. Firstly, I'll go to Getting Started. You can see I have a page showing you a little bit about yourself. So I'll fill in these details. And I'll go 80 as my weight and select it there. The next page is going to give you a daily goal. So this is a water drinking app. The idea is you have a set amount of water that you want to drink daily. And for me, I'm going to make it 2 liters. So I'm going to type that in, 2000 milliliters there. And we'll go to the home screen next. This screen's just a dummy screen. We haven't actually done anything there. So if I go to sign up, it's just going to go straight to the main screen. So here we are. So you can see with the water drinking app, I can add some liquid in if I want. So I could choose fizzy drink, for example. And let's say I've drunk 500 milliliters. And you can see that the goal is 2000 as I input before. And you can see that the amount that I just put in showed up in the completed rate, and the drink bottle amount changed. I could add in a bit more if I wanted to. So add some water, and you can see it kind of updates in the background. I could add in 700 and you can see a massive jump there. I can also remove some of the water if I accidentally enter a value. So it's a fairly simple app. The last thing is I've got a settings page. None of this is really hooked up. The logout button doesn't work either, but it shows you just a little bit about the things that you've set up in the onboarding screens. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Amplify guide and we'll start to add in authentication for this particular application. So I will go to the Amplify documentation first. So this is docs.amplify.aws. you can just simply do a Google search and you'll find it, or you could find it from the AWS console as well, if you're in the console and you search for AWS Amplify. So you can see nothing's configured or set up at the moment. So we'll go through the getting started. This is a Flutter app that I've built, so I'm going to select Flutter, getting started, and we will go and have a look at how to set up our app. So we'll start the tutorial. So I've already got Flutter in. I've built the app using it. I'm using VS Code as my IDE. So the next step that I need to do is I need to grab this code here, which installs the Flutter CLI packages for AWS Amplify. And I'll go back to Visual Studio Code, and I'll just go to my terminal window that install this package, and I'll paste that command in there. So what this will do is this will give us a CLI that we can call different commands like Amplify, add authentication, Amplify configure, all these different commands that will get Amplify set up very, very quickly in this app. Might take a little bit to install, so whilst we're waiting for that action to complete, I'll walk you through a little bit of the app. So effectively I've got a config models file, so this is where I'm keeping all the models of my data. And then I have a bunch of views, which is home, login, onboarding, password resets, and sign up. So these are all the screens that I've built for my app so far. And I've got like mini screens in here or sub views. So sign up confirmation, we'll need that later. And some of the settings areas have been segregated from each other as well. So it looks like, whilst that's done, looks like we've got the CLI configured now. So we'll go back to the documentation and we'll see what the next step is. So we need an AWS account. We already have that, but you can follow the guide if you haven't created an AWS account yet. So you can just pop that out and follow it. Now, I've already got the Flutter app, so I can kind of scroll down this and get to the next part. So what I want to do here is I will want to open up my pubspec YAML file within my Flutter application. So this is the Flutter file that acts similar if you've come from an NPM background. It's all the dependencies that you're bringing in or libraries from third parties. So I'll navigate down and I will find the pubspec file. Here it is. And if I scroll down, you can see I'm using a couple of third-party libraries like Google Fonts and Provider, but I've got Amplify Core and Auth here that matches up to what it wants to add into the app here as well. You'll notice that Analytics is listed here, but I don't have it within my pubspec file. That's because I'm not using Analytics in my application at this point in time, but I do want to bring in Amplify Core and Amplify Auth. So I'll save this file. And there will be a Flutter pub get command that's run automatically for me. But if you're not using Visual Studio Code or Android Studio, you can just pop that into the terminal and that will install the two Amplify packages. So now that that's completed, we'll have a look at how to integrate into our application. The first thing is we actually want to do an Amplify configure actually, because we haven't set anything up with Amplify just yet. So before I do the next steps, what I might actually do is I will go over to libraries. I'll just go to project setup and I'll go to the prerequisites. I just want to find the part about configuring. Here we go. So I want to run this command that uses the CLI that I installed just beforehand. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio Code again, and I'm just going to run an Amplify configure. So what this command does is this sets my project up for access to my AWS account. So it's going to set up an IAM user in a second. So I'll pop out to the console. I'll just go back into my app, press enter. I'm already signed in, but if you haven't signed into the console, please do that now. The next thing you'll do is you'll pick a region. I'm based in Sydney or Melbourne, so I'm going to use the Sydney region. So I'll select Southeast 2. And my username is just going to be temp amplify. I will be deleting this afterwards, so you can't use the keys. And what this will do is once I've hit enter, it brings me out to the console again, and it's going to ask me to create a user. I'll just clean up some of those tabs. You can see the username I entered in the console. The terminal just before is showing up there. The only access type that I need is programmatic access, so I only need this one ticked. And you'll see that aligns to what it says in the guide somewhere here as well. The next step that I do need though is basically I need to make sure I've got administrator access on the next page. So I'll go to the next page and you can see administrator access is already configured. Now the rest of the setup's quite simple by memory, so I think I just step through until I get to page 5. Yep. So I'll do that. I don't need tags or anything like that. I just want to go ahead and create the user. So the user's now set up. I don't want to navigate around away from this page. It's pretty important because I want to grab that access key. So I want to copy that access key and I want to bring it back into Visual Studio Code. I'll press enter on the terminal screen and you can see now it asks for the access key. So I'm just going to paste that in there. And then now it wants the access token. So I'll go back to the console and I'll copy that secret access key token and I'll copy that into the terminal again, and I'll just call this profile temp amplify. And you can see that I've successfully set up that user. So that's fantastic. So let's have a look at what the next step is in the guide. I think it is, yes, it is. It's essentially now what we want to do is we want the run amplify init. This is going to set up a project within the AWS console for our Amplify app that we're creating. So I'll go back and I'll paste this in, Amplify init. And I'm happy with the default name, Water Tracker. This is the development environment. I'm using Visual Studio Code. And you can see that Flutter is one of the choices of language here. And I can leave the configuration file in the default area as well, but it's going to basically pop it into the same folder that I've got my app sitting in at the moment. So that's all fine, but I could put a location elsewhere if I wanted to. Now, what you'll see in a few seconds as it goes through and creates all the details, you'll see that there'll be an Amplify folder that appears. This is all the CloudFormation code that basically says what you want to do within the cloud. And so all of this is essentially Amplify is using code. It's going to build code for your infrastructure. So I will select the profile I created before my temp amplify user when I did the amplify configure. And it's going to start to build the backend. So you'll see a configuration file come into the library folder, and then you'll see the CloudFormation appear in an amplify folder here as well. And the cool thing is, as I add things in with the CLI, it's going to update that CloudFormation, and then I can do an amplify push whenever I add a new feature in, so that straight away I can build those resources in the cloud. This does take a little while, so whilst we're waiting for it to build, I'll show you that you can actually see it build in the console. So firstly, you'll see that there's the Amplify app that should have appeared within the Amplify section of the console. So it's building there. So that was just in the AWS Amplify service. But if I go to CloudFormation, you can see that it's built a water tracker app in CloudFormation, and I can see that it's busy creating all the resources. So that mirrors essentially what's happening in Visual Studio Code here. And it looks like we're in luck. It looks like the app has been added successfully, which is awesome. So what we want to do next is we want to go amplify status and see what's happened with all that configuration. So I don't have anything to create, but I can see the amplify folder and a bunch of files that it's created in there for generating the backend in the cloud. And I can see it's created an amplify configuration file as well. So that's spot on to what we want. So the next thing that I do want to do to get this app up and running is I want to go back here, and essentially I want to set up some authentication. So I'm going to go to the authentication side of the document, and I'll go to the getting started, and you can see that there is the amplify add authentication command that I'd like to put into the console. So I'll go back to Visual Studio Code and I'll run that command. And it's going to, now I want to choose the default configuration. With Amplify, it's highly customizable, so you can configure everything by how you want it to work within the cloud, but the default's a good way to get started. Now, I want my users to be set up with a username, so I want them to be able to enter a username, maybe give me their email address so I can validate that, and then have them set a password as well. So I'm going to choose username for the authentication mechanism. Now, I don't want to add anything advanced in, so I'm just going to say I'm simply done. And the next thing I want to do is if I go Amplify status again, I can see that this will look a little bit differently. So here we go. So you can see I've got authentication sitting there now, which is pretty cool. Now, there's no authentication in the backend just yet. So if I was to go into the console and I look for, let's say, Cognito, which is what we use for authentication, you can see that there's no user pools or anything in here. So nothing exists at the moment. So what I want to do to push this to the cloud is run a Amplify push. And this will then set up authentication for me to use within the cloud. I'll just go, I'm sure I want to continue. And it's going to take a little bit to build the authentication, but that's okay. We'll let it run for a little bit. What we can do is we can go back and we can refresh the screen to see if anything's coming yet. Not yet. That's okay. So as we wait for this, maybe what we'll do is we'll go to the next part. So we added in to our pub/spec file Amplify. So maybe what we want to do is we want to initialize it. So how do we initialize it? Essentially what we want to do is we want to go to the, where do I want to put it? Let's put it in the onboarding step, because that's really the first view that everyone sees. You can put it in the app or the main view as well, but the first view that everyone logs into is the onboarding step. So I'll make the changes here. So the first thing is I want to, if I go back to the documentation, I'll want to simply add in, let's go sign in. I want to add in the Amplify libraries into my application. So at the very top, I do have a couple of the packages here. These match what I actually created in the pub/spec file. So what I'll do is I'll uncomment these. In the speed of time, I've kind of commented out everything to make it nice and quick for everyone, or else we'd be spending a bit more than half an hour here. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to, once I've got these files available to the app, I want to create a Amplify instance. And within that, I want to then do a configuration. So if I uncomment these files, essentially what happens is when I go to the onboarding page, the very first screen of my application, when it boots up, it will automatically configure an Amplify for me. And one of the things that it does look for to get the configuration is it does look for that Amplify configuration Dart file that it created when we ran the Amplify init. So that's going to have some of the settings in there, and then it's going to refer to some of the settings that can be found in the Amplify folder as things get built as well. So if I relaunch my app, and I'm still waiting for my authentication to get built, but that's okay. If I relaunch my app and I go to the debug console, hopefully looks like it might not have installed the plugin fully. That's okay. What we can do is we can have a look at the pubspec file. Maybe what we'll do is we'll run the pubget command once the authentication finishes, and then we should be in business. Here we go. Oh, here we go. You can see Amplify configuration's been built a lot more out. Maybe that was actually what I was waiting for. So let's just refresh this. Let's go to the debug console. And I reckon I will run that command again. So I'll just do not amplify, I will do a Flutter pub get, which basically pulls everything from the pubspec file down. And then I'll just do a quick reset. I know, I think I actually have to stop it and then relaunch it. So once that's done, I reckon it will then find the packages that we added just beforehand. I think it has to relaunch with Flutter to get the packages. It looks like we have a pod install issue. I'll quickly fix that up. You do sometimes get that if you've already had the pod file updated. I'll work on that in a second and get that fixed for everyone. Excellent. So I fixed that issue just by simply deleting the podlock file and then going to the iOS directory that the podlock file set in, and then I ran a pod install command, and that allowed me to then get the app running again. So what I've done next is I've followed the documentation. So it basically says you add your libraries in, and then you'll add this command in, and then your UI within the sign up screen that we're working on should then call this and then try and set up a user. So if we go back to the login screen code, you'll see if I scroll down a little bit further, you can see that that code is sitting in here. The only difference is instead of async, I'm using futures. So that matches that particular code there. And I've implemented it, like I've captured from the form boxes, and I've plugged all that into here as well. And then I have some validation on this as well. So if I try and sign up and I don't have an email address or something like that, it's going to say it's missing. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a user. And I will set a dummy password as well. And I'll click sign up. And what that does is you can see that it's saying that I haven't signed up completely in the console. That's perfectly fine. But what I should see is if I check my email, I will see in a few seconds a code. Now the sign up confirmation screen I've pre-built as well. So essentially I've done the same thing. I've added in the two Amplify libraries, and then I have gone down here and I have added the sign up code just here that it asks you for if you check the guide as a second stage if you're getting confirmation. So you can see that code there matches up to this. Now I have the sign up code, so I'm going to type these numbers in. And hopefully I'll be able to sign in. And there we go. We can see that we have user signed in equals true. So I've got some detection to look for a token whenever I reach the home screen. So I'm going to have a quick look at that. So you can see in here, it basically looks for a sign-in session. I think I'll also trigger it as soon as you come out of that screen as well. So as soon as you come out of the confirmation screen, it checks the token. Now, very quickly, I did add the same code for logout that you'll find within the wiki. So if you were to look at the sign out page, I've added that in, and I've just added that into my logout code here. So if I go back to the app and I go to logout, you can see that I get brought to the login screen. Now I'm no longer authenticated, but if I try and log in as well, you can see user signed in equals true updated, and I've authenticated. So you can see very quickly how I added authentication into my app. I used the existing login screens that I had, but I connected incognito, and I was able to get this within my app within about 15 to 20 minutes. Now that I've shown you how easy it is to plug AWS Amplify into an existing application, I really want to touch upon how you can start your own journey into the cloud and Amplify. The first stop is the Modern Applications Resources Hub. This is essentially the place that you'll go to learn about serverless applications, and you'll see many different patterns and best practices within this hub. It's a fantastic resource for you all to use. The next thing is AWS training and certification is really the first place you should go when you want to learn cloud skills and capabilities. I would highly recommend that you check out the training and certification assets that we have within the training and certification site. And for Amplify, I'd highly recommend having a look at the AWS Developer Associate. It's a really good starting point there as well, if you want to dive straight into it and you've got a little bit of development under your belt already. Last but not least, thank you very much for attending the session. I hope you enjoyed the content, and please feel free to leave us feedback in the surveys and also follow us on social media. Thank you very much.